Talk Law on this Thursday morning on Radio 97. Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay. With us every Thursday, she brings her legal expertise and provides some general advice on the latest hot topics with experience that spans more than 25 years. Count 'em in the area of property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. With us once again, hi Despina.
Hello, Wayne. Hello, Brooke.
Good morning, Wayno. Good morning, Despina. Alrighty, back for another segment of Talking Law. And recently we have been talking about a few real life stories in regards to body corporate. And this one is a doozy because it's local. This story happened right here in Helensvale, and it's all to do with a fence. So, Despina, can you tell us what happened in this case?
Yes, I'd love to. And we've talked a lot on the show, I think, about body corporate situations. And it is something to really understand what you're getting yourself into when you go into living in strata in a community title. And this particular one involved a community title called the Peninsula. Now, just to be clear, this is the one that is situated in Helensvale, and it backs onto Saltwater Creek. So people listening out there today, I'm sure if they know Helensvale, they'll know Saltwater Creek, and they know the area I'm talking about. But this particular one's a gated estate, and there are detached houses. So that's just another small point to mention, that when you buy a house, if it's in a gated estate, typically you're going to find it's in a body corporate. So body corporate doesn't necessarily mean a mid-rise or a high-rise or a townhouse that's generally attached. These are all detached single homes within an estate that's gated, or sometimes they're not gated, but it's within an estate. So it is strata that we're talking about, strata living and community title living. So this particular one involved a breach, a potential breach, which was found to actually be a breach by the adjudicator of the bylaws. Now, remember a few weeks ago, we talked about how important it is to read the bylaws when you buy into strata. So that's why I wanted to mention at the beginning, you need to know if you are buying into strata, into community living and a community title, because every community title scheme has bylaws. Okay, some are pretty ordinary and pretty basic. Some are very comprehensive, and they can go for pages and pages and pages. So really important that you and your solicitor read the bylaws before you go unconditional when you're looking to, and you have signed a contract to buy somewhere that's in a body corporate. Because as we've seen in the past, we've talked about bylaws, such as the case we talked about a few weeks ago with the location of garbage bins inside garages, which is a bit unusual. This particular one involved a landscaping and architectural code. And there are many estates on the Gold Coast, particularly at the north end where we are, so Hope Island, Helensvale, etc., that have landscaping and architectural codes. And these are codes that were originally set up by the original developer when they built the estate. And of course, I suppose the intention by developers in doing that is that they wanted to have a very a similar look and feel throughout an estate, so someone doesn't go and paint a house purple or, you know, something odd that sticks out that might detract from the value of the houses within the estate. So that's the intention behind landscaping and architectural codes. But interestingly, in this case, the landscaping and architectural code was a little bit more than, you know, vibrant colors used to paint the exterior of the house.
Yeah.
It actually involved, if you want to erect fences, retaining walls, and things like that, that are a little bit more than just painting. And there were specific requirements set out as to what you can and cannot do, and specific materials that you were allowed to use if you wanted to build a fence, and materials that were prohibited. And you might say to yourself, well, when I buy a house, isn't there a fence already? Not necessarily. So in these estates, often the front of the house is left open because you're in a gated estate. So fences aren't necessarily built like you might see on a main road. So you are allowed to do certain things and make improvements to your home. But if there's a landscaping and architectural code, as there was with this one, you've actually got to comply. So we're talking again about complying with the bylaws, which you need to understand when you buy into strata living.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we'll read this bylaw a bit so people can understand. And I am sure that people listening out there today will have come across this or know someone that's bought into an estate where there's a specific landscaping or architectural code that applies. And if you're buying vacant land, for example, in a body corporate, and there's a few up at the north end, again, I'm aware of, and you're building a house, particularly then, there would definitely be architectural codes that you've got to give your builder and architect to make sure you can comply. And so this particular lot owner, unfortunately for him, they weren't aware of the bylaws having this architectural code. And there was some reference in the case about, oh, well, nobody told me and my solicitor didn't know. And unfortunately, that's not an excuse for non-compliance. Yeah. So
he did have a solicitor.
Well, apparently the case was not about how he was represented previously. It was about his actions after he became an owner and what he did with his property. But undoubtedly he was represented. But again, it comes down to proper representation. And the bylaws are a particular important aspect of buying into strata.
It sounds like he needs a new lawyer, I think. Now, in that case, and as you say, this does happen a bit where you come across these bylaws and you find that well, we've breached the bylaw. In strictly dollars and cents terms and legal terms, if you have breached a bylaw, what happens? What goes on from there? I mean, obviously there's money involved.
There's money involved because if you've breached a bylaw, 9 times out of 10, you've already spent money doing something that you're not allowed to actually do. And you can't get that money back. So if you start to build a fence that doesn't comply with the architectural landscaping code within your estate, then you've got to pull it down. Right. So, and that's unfortunate, but these are the things that you might come across, you see, and we want to enlighten and educate listeners out there that when you're buying into strata, the bylaws are always an integral part of understanding what you're getting into. So this particular bylaw under the landscaping and construction code, it was called actually, had a few aspects to it. So typically, if you want to make any improvements to your house or your lot, you've got to lodge a building application typically and get council approval. That's all got to be approved by the body corporate, right? So you've actually got to first approach the body corporate and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you give me consent? You've got to typically give them plans and drawings, etc., so they're happy with it. It also had part of the bylaw aspects about fences and storage facilities and retaining walls and the use of these vibrant colours, which they didn't allow. So that was another aspect. But the one that he breached was in relation to the materials used. If you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that was part of it. So if we read the bylaw, it talks about all the street front fencing and the constructed fence between the side boundary to the dwelling and the rear has to be constructed of sandstone, limestone, concrete panel, painted bagged brickwork or rendered block work with coloured render or texture finish. Now, that's quite specific.
He didn't do any of those, obviously.
Well, unfortunately, he didn't.
Picket fence with some white paint. That's what he wanted.
Yeah. And what he did is he actually used material that was specifically prohibited. That's even worse. So he actually, I feel sorry for this guy. Yeah. He actually used timber infill panels, and that was specifically prohibited.
It was listed there in writing, do not do that, and he didn't.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate for him, and of course because he breached it, and the body corporate took him to the adjudicator because he kept. He didn't do anything about it. So when you ask before, Wayne, what happens when you breach? Well, the body corporate has to issue you a breach notice, and they have to explain to you what you've done. And then they give you time to remedy it, to rectify. They don't just take you off to the tribunal straight away. That would be unfair and unreasonable. And some time passes because it costs the body corporate to go to the tribunal, and the body corporate doesn't always recover those costs. So they don't do it lightly. And in the end, he didn't comply. So they took him to the adjudicator's office, and of course the commissioner or the adjudicator here made orders he did breach. And interestingly, I think, well, I can't speak for the minds of the particular tribunal member, but the costs were not awarded against him. So the body corporate in the end claimed for costs to go to the tribunal, and it wasn't awarded. So I'm thinking that maybe the tribunal member maybe felt sorry for him.
A little bit sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So the costs incurred by the body corporate to take him to the tribunal were not claimed from the lot owner.
Sure.
I think that was a good result anyway, because he kept saying, I didn't know. So there was this innocence. So it wasn't a deliberate act. And I think if it was a deliberate act and they could prove that, that would be a different outcome. So it's super, super important to understand the bylaws, like I said. And look, in the case, it talked about the lot owner pleading a couple of things for justification for what he did. And that is, well, I just did what all the other lot owners did, or some of them did, and I just followed the look and feel of the other houses. And what the adjudicator said, two things is, well, one, you haven't proven this. So remember, I've talked before about it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So he didn't bring any evidence to the tribunal to say, oh, look at these 6 houses next to me with the photos. Yeah, that's right. And the second aspect is, well, if someone else has breached the bylaw, it doesn't give you justification to breach the bylaw yourself.
We're just little sheep. We don't know. Poor guy.
The pleading does not help.
Yeah, no. And he ended up taking down the fence, obviously.
Yeah, he obviously had to do that. And it went obviously at a considerable cost to him. So, lesson is to read your bylaws. You might have a landscaping, architectural, construction code that applies to your particular property in a strata.
That's it. Read your bylaws. Thank you, Despina. And coming up next, what are the real life risks that are affecting locals when buying a new home and going under that contract? That's coming up next on Talking Law on Radio 97.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.